Hello everybody and welcome to Planet Neolexia. I am your host Annotate, and this is going to be my personal nerd haven where I talk about video games and science fiction and literature and other things that interest me, and hopefully things that interest you as well. This is going to be my first ever playthrough. We are looking at a game that is in its early alpha called the Westport Independent. I'm very excited about this game. It's been compared in the articles that I've read to Papers, Please, and I absolutely love that game, so I'm very excited to see how this pans out. Basically, you are an editor in charge of a newspaper back in the 1940s in a country where they have a lot of government censorship and things, and you basically have to decide what kind of stories you're going to cover and how you're going to cover them. And this affects things like, for example, if the government gets some suspicion of you and thinks that you are loyal to the rebels, or if you're, if they like you and the stories that you run and think that you're loyal to them. So there's going to be a lot of moral dilemmas here about what kind of choices we make. I have played the first couple of days just to see how it works and everything and get the hang of the controls, but because this is early alpha, it's basically kind of a tutorial anyway, and it does a really good job of explaining how everything works. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in and take a look at what's going on. And I think that you're really going to like this. I'm very excited about it. So here we go. A message from the Loyalist governments. What is the Public Culture Bill? It comes into force the 16th of May, 1969. Now, here it says 1969, and everywhere else it says 1949, so I think that this is either a typo or that they changed their mind about when the game is going to take place. Either way, I'm sure they will fix this. Again, the game is in early alpha. There are a few minor typos and some other things here. The devs who created this game are in Sweden, so they use the Queen's English, and there are some things that look a little weird the way they're phrased or something like that. And it's not even necessarily, like a translation problem or anything like that. It really is just because they're using the Queen's English, the thing that they use pretty much in every country around the world except America. Just, take that with a grain of salt. If you're an American, don't read too much into that and think, oh, the game is not doing, not speaking well or whatever. It's not them, it's actually us. We don't speak proper English over here. So anyway, Public Culture Bill will improve the quality of independent media outlets, guidelines for independent media outlets to follow, mandatory for independent media outlets to join the Loyalist News and Media Association. Now here's where it gets interesting. What is your responsibility until the bill comes into force? Do not print deceitful content that may harm the appearance of our country. Do not print deceitful content that will harm the appearance of the Loyalist government. Do not print deceitful content that may harm the appearance of the president. Do not print deceitful content that may glorify the acts of rebels or other criminals. Do print content that strengthens loyalty towards the government. Do print content that inspires morality in the public. And do print content that heartens the propriety in our society. So basically what's going on is there is a new law coming in that basically the government will take complete control of the media. And there's only a few weeks until this bill starts, so in the meantime, we have to decide whose side we're on. Are we on the side of the Loyalists, and are we siding with the government? Or are we on the side of the rebels who think that the government is not doing a very good job in this country and is running the place into the ground? And our choices will affect how we are perceived by the public and by the government. So it's going to show us how to edit articles, which include headlines, and the choices that we make affect stories, and we can also choose to not run certain stories as well. As you can see from the style, it already looks very much like Papers, Please. It's got this gritty black and white feel. It definitely has this newspapery feel to it. I love the setup and the way everything looks. This basically really doesn't seem to have much of a purpose. It has a few things. Well, it does tell you a little bit more about the bars up here, so let me read this to you. The bars at the top right corner illustrate two things. The white bar shows how much the public is sympathizing with the rebels, and the dark bar shows the loyalist suspicion of you. Remember that while the rebels grow strong when dissatisfaction against the government is shown, the public steps away from the rebels when they are directly accused of violent acts. Excuse me, sorry about that, I had a hiccup. To close this book, drag it to blah 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 blah. Thanks for previewing this early access game. You're welcome. So over here, this is the Loyalist faction, this is the rebels, a little fist over here. And as you can see right now, the public's opinion is mostly sided with the government, and the government has no suspicions against us whatsoever. We are totally cool in their book. Mr. Editor, Phil has been putting up more Loyalist propaganda in the office. You know I can't stand this shit, so I decided to pull it down. It should be on your desk together with this note. Frank. Loyalty, morality, and propriety. These are the basis of a civilized society. Yeah, it gets really fun. So, over here, these little folders on the corner, we get to look at our employees. As you can see, Anne is a parent, and she lives by the Eastern Factory. She's married, went to community college, and everybody's comfort level starts out right in the middle. So they're neither happy nor sad to be working here. They're just, I assume that this is their comfort level as far as how they feel about working for this paper. Maybe it's their overall comfort at home as well. I'm not 100% sure. And that's probably something that's going to change. Again, this game is an early alpha, so this is not anywhere near the finished version. I would assume that there's going to be a lot of things changed and added and tweaked as they work on this. But Anne, as you can see, her opinion is pretty much middle ground. She's a little bit more in favor of the Loyalist government and a little bit less towards the rebels, but she's kind of middle ground. Frank, on the other hand, here is 100% rebel. He lives alone, has no college education, lives by the Eastern Factories, and opposed the Loyalists before they came into power. So he is also relatively comfortable, but he's 100% with the rebel faction, and he has some Loyalist suspicion. The Loyalists are a little bit suspicious of his intentions, so depending on what stories we give him will affect that, as you will see. Phil is the exact opposite. He's a member of the Loyalist Party. He is totally in favor of them. So as you can see, his opinion and his Loyalist suspicion are both all the way to the left, and I unfortunately cannot arrow over there because it disappears when I do. So you're just gonna have to follow along while I'm speaking. But he lives in the Western Districts, he lives with a disabled brother, he went to a private college. Julie is another one of... Here's what's interesting. It doesn't say anything about her personal life at all. It just says she's known for having doubtful opinions of the government, went to college and worked abroad as a freelance writer. But it doesn't say anything about her personal life. We have no idea where she lives, if she's married, or anything like that, so I don't know if they're going to add more to her bio or how that works. But the interesting thing is, even though it says straight up that she is known for having doubtful opinions, her Loyalist suspicion is really low, and her opinion is also kind of middle ground. She is slated a little bit more towards the rebels, but not nearly as much as Frank. So I'm really curious to know why... I'm curious to know more about that and how that works exactly. And I also think it's interesting that the two most polarized characters are the men, and the women are more middle ground in their opinions. I'm not saying anything good or bad about that, I just think it's interesting to note. And I'm not sure if that was a conscious choice or if it just ended up that way. But I think it's cool that they, you know, they have a really good mix here. They have a really good mix of people in all different kinds of political spectrums and also both genders and stuff, you know. That's cool to see. So far, so good. I'm interested in what's going on. Now, over here, they have two tutorial articles that basically just tell you a little bit about how to edit articles and stuff like that, and a little bit about your employees, and then two real articles. The first time I went through this, and like I said, I only played like the first couple of days, but I decided since these were not real articles, I threw them in the discard pile over here, and didn't use them at all. And I guess you're not supposed to do that, because when I went to the screen where you're supposed to lay out the pages of the paper and get everything ready to print, it told me, hey, you don't have all your stories in here, and it's going to affect your sales. But I couldn't figure out how to get back to this screen, So I don't know if they don't have a button implemented, or if it's a hotkey that I'm not aware of, or if that's something that they're going to add later. But yeah, so this time I'm going to try to add these in there, even though they're not real articles, and just see how that works. So let's look at this one first. Tutorial article number 1, censoring. One of your main mechanics in this game is to censor articles. You do this by clicking on the paragraphs that seem inappropriate, like so. You click on it, it crosses it out. When you censor an article, that content won't be shown to the public, meaning it won't have any effect on them, nor will it affect the government's suspicion of you. You can also change the headline by clicking on it. Different headlines can change how the article is portrayed. And here's the example that they gave. Wonderful and extraordinary. Oh yes. So, that is basically how you edit articles. Here it tells you a little bit about the employees, which I already kind of went through. When you censor an article, it needs to be transcribed. To do this, you put it in one of the name folders on the right over here. The employees all have different opinions. They'll be discussing you and how you run your paper. The employees also have their own lives to protect, so don't blame them if they don't want to follow you into the government or rebels hit list. So basically everything that you do affects not only the public's perception of you and the government, but also your employees. Of course, they have their own opinions and they talk about you behind your back and stuff, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, that's basically how that works so far. Now here are the two quote-unquote real articles that we have to take a look at. The first one is Loyalist government to take harder actions against suspected criminals. A new reform is passed that will hasten the arrests of rebel supporters. The reform consists of exceptions in various privacy laws, allowing police to receive search warrants faster. Most of the exceptions apply to ex-criminals with relations to the rebels. However, some of the exceptions also apply to civilians who have expressed disloyal opinions against the government. That's bad. So, since we only have 4 articles to start with, we're pretty much guaranteed to run them all. Unless we want to take a hit in sales like I did last time. But if we run this as is, of course, you know, this kind of makes the government look bad, and we have to decide if we want to do that or not. So, here's the last one. Public Culture Bill has passed. The Public Culture Bill that the government presented last year has passed. The new bill has been created to stop the creation and distribution of incorrect and improper contents. The bill will force independent media outlets to either shut down or join the new government-funded union called the Loyalist News and Media Association. So once again, and this kind of directly affects us, it's talking about the bill that we are going to be impacted by in a few weeks. And we have to decide, how are we going to put this in the paper? Do we want to just say, hey, this bill is passed, and maybe leave this part out, or do we want to flat out say, they're going to force us to shut down if we don't play ball? Yeah. So, I think we're going to leave it as is. We're going to give that one to Julie. We're going to give this one to Frank. And the 2 tutorial ones we're just going to throw in here. I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to edit it at all. I'm just going to leave them all as is. So, once you have taken all the articles out of here, decided which ones to discard and which ones to give to your people. Oops. Sorry, the controls are a little bit sensitive and you don't actually click on it to bring it up, you just move your mouse over it. So sometimes stuff pops up unintentionally, and I don't know if they're going to change that or if I'm just sloppy or what the deal is, but yeah. Anyway, once you've got everything selected that you want, you go to Print, and here you have your page layout, which in the industry they call dummy sheets, and you figure out where you want to put your articles. So, I think we're going to put this one here. The next page we're going to put the Culture Bill, because it's not all about us. And then we're just going to throw these 2 tutorial ones back here. And as you can see, as we add articles, it adjusts these little lines over here and it shows what kinds of stories we're running. I did try out changing like what page stuff goes on to see if that affected the bars at all, and it didn't seem to. So I'm not sure if that's something that's gonna affect it later. I would assume that it would, though. I mean, if you run something on the front page, that's pretty much the centerpiece of your whole paper. So I would assume that that has an impact somehow, but I don't know if that's been implemented yet, or if that's just not reflecting here, or whatever. Again, it's early alpha. They're still figuring it out, and I'm still figuring out how to play this game, so yeah, it's still tutorial telling me here's how you turn pages. Distribution. So once you've laid out all the pages and you figured out where everything's going, you click on distribution, and here's an interesting thing. You get to decide how many papers you're going to send to each one of these districts. The northern suburbs it's basically the rich part of town, and as you can see down here in this little graph here, whenever you arrow over something, it shows you what kinds of stories they're most interested in. The rich people in the northern suburbs prefer industrial and celebrity kind of stories, which we don't have very much of in this paper. The western districts, which is like the middle class neighborhood, they are more interested in crime and celebrity stuff. The eastern factories, which is the industrial neighborhood basically, they prefer social and industrial, whereas the southern docks, which is kind of the slums, they prefer social and crime stuff. So you have to decide how many papers you want to send to each one of these areas, and you kind of want to send more papers to the areas where you have stuff catered to their likes and dislikes, because you want to sell papers. The more papers you sell, the better, obviously. So, like, for example, since our strongest stories are in crime and social, we kind of want to sell more papers in the southern docks, because the northern suburbs are not interested in what we have in today's paper. As you can see, celebrity and industrial are the lowest. So I'm going to kind of beef this up. Let's put that at 40. Our next strongest is going to be eastern factories, because we have a very, very high social marker on our paper. So yeah, let's do 25 there. This is the next highest, so let's do 20. And let me see here. That is 60, 70, 85, so we've got 15% left to play with, and that's going to go here in the northern area, because they're not going to sell as well here as they will in here, because we don't have the stuff that they want. So that affects it. So once you've figured out where you're going to send stuff to, you click on send to stores, and boom, it goes to prints. And then you get to see, well, first everybody talks smack about you behind your back, and then you get to see how well the paper sold, and also what the government thinks of you. And that's about as far as I got, so let's read this part here. Frank says, you know, I've never been a big fan of the Loyalist government, but the public culture bill is even worse than I imagined. Phil says, don't blame the government, blame the yellow journalism and blatant lies that get published these days. There's nothing good about a misinformed public. Frank says, well, yeah, sure, but do you realize how much power this will give them over the media? And Julie says, I've got to go with Frank on this one. I can't see how the public culture bill would be beneficial for anyone but the governments. Phil says, quality control is better than no quality control. And do you agree with me, right? Dan says, well, I see your point, Phil, but I'm also not sure if this was the best solution. We as media outlets do have a scary amount of power over people's opinions, but I'm also not sure if giving that power to the government is a great idea either. So, we have 5 weeks left until the bill is passed, or until it's implemented. So let's see how we did on sales. As expected, not so good in the northern suburbs. And southern docks sold the best. Eastern docks sold almost as well. Actually, not as well as I thought. We have a lot of unsold. If you click on it here, it'll show you how these bars work. So this bar illustrates sales. The container represents the people of that district. The red bar shows how many papers were distributed to that area, whereas the light bar shows how many papers were sold. The more you sell, the more popular you get. The more popular you get, the more papers you can distribute, and the more money you make, of course. It's a business. You gotta make money. People's opinions will also affect your sales. Likewise, a well-selling paper will also affect people's opinions. So as you can see here, that is the Loyalist faction, that is the Rebel faction, and of course, the opinion changes based on what kind of articles you run and how you choose to run them, and it moves that bar around. So, we sold about half the papers that we delivered to the Southern Docks, and about the same in the Eastern factories. Didn't sell so well up here, and it looks like the opinions, for the most part, are still siding with the government. But the Southern Docks are kind of starting to slide more towards the Rebel side because they're poor people, and poor people are the most impacted by what's going on right now. So they have a vested interest in this. Now, as you can see, the opinion jumped in favor of the Rebels a little bit, but it has not, interestingly, affected the Loyalist suspicion of us. They still trust us implicitly. And I'm not sure why, because we kind of raked them through the mud a little bit, but not an extreme amount, so yeah, I'm not really sure how that works and how they tally that up, but maybe it does have something to do with the page layout or something. I'm not really sure what all is affected by that. But anyway, we're on the next day, and we have a new batch of articles that we're going to look at in the next episode. Let's take a peek at our people really quick, because I remember, yeah, you see how the comfort level has gone up a little bit for those two? It doesn't look like it's changed for Frank. Yeah. So their comfort level changes depending on what kind of stories you have them write, and also Loyalist suspicion is not just for the paper in general, it also changes for the people. So I would imagine that's something you gotta watch out for. Like, if it gets really, really high for somebody, I don't know what could happen. Maybe they could get arrested or killed or something could happen. I'm not really sure how that works. But I suspect that if that's not something that's been implemented yet in the alpha version, it will be something to be genuinely concerned about when the full version of the game comes out. So, next episode, we will get started on our first batch of real stories and figure out how much trouble we want to get into with the government. It'll be fun. So once again, thank you very much for watching this. I hope you're enjoying it, and please check out the game for yourself. It's called the Westport Independent, and I will see you next time. Thank you.